The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our session on excelling at your strategic business reporting exam. This is predominantly going to be delivered by our ACCA SBR tutor guru, Rob Mullen, who's given and who's graciously agreed to give his precious time to us this afternoon, and support and guide our students through some of the key tips and techniques, or rather help unveil what the examiner's mindset is. And without really wanting to take too much time away from Rob, let's just dive into a session. But before we do that, I'd like to really formally introduce Rob to all of you that are attending the session today. So Rob's an fellow ACCA member as well, and has, like I said, has also been a ACCA tutor guru. He's the IFRS expert and does a lot of freelance work across the globe. He does a lot of work for our markets, ACCA markets in the Middle East, Malaysia, and Pakistan, etc. So Rob has heavily been involved in guiding the students and a lot of tutors across the globe and in different regions. So without further ado, Rob, firstly, thank you for your precious time, and thank you for your contribution to today's session. I am just going to hand it over to you as I make you the presenter now. So over to you, Rob.
Brilliant. Let me just wait for this to change across. I'm not. Oh, fantastic. Thank you very, very much to hear. Let's just wait for this. Right. Everybody, very, very, very warm welcome to you all. I'm here. I've got my tea for our session, and obviously we've got quite a few things to go through. I'm going to leave the camera up for a while, and then I'll most likely take it down. Please, I want you to use the chat panel. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I want you to feedback. I want you to use this. I want to try and make it interactive. So at the moment, I might just ask this to here, because I'm just seeing organizer only in case I want to send a question to everyone. Anyway, before I share my screen with you, we get into the main part of our session today, I want to say this to every one of you who's looking at this session today. Every one of you out there is more than capable of doing really, really, really well in this strategic business reporting exam. You've got to have confidence. You've got to have confidence in your own abilities. You really, really, really must. You can do this. One of the things that helps you is knowing how to approach the exam. And this is where today's session and our next session comes in, with predominantly today looking at the impact of the examiner's report. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and
while you do that, Rob, just very quickly, so yeah, if you wanted to share questions with the audience, where you see organizers only, there should be a drop-down menu, and if you click on that, you'll be able to see an option that says entire audience.
I've got no entire audience. I've got organizers and panelists.
Right. Okay. Let us look into that for you in while you start with your session.
Yeah.
Just in the interest of all those attending, I mean, we will have a dedicated 5 minutes at the end for question and answer. So do keep your questions coming. We've you've got a questions tab on the top left-hand side of your screen. That's where you'll be able to send your questions across. I will be able to read them out to Rob during the Q&A session, and Rob will be able to answer them as and when.
But hopefully we can get that sorted, because I just want to. There are various things that I'm going to be asking you as we go through. Anyway, let's start, and let me just get into the PowerPoint. Let's put this up. So everybody, first of all, just going to minimize that a bit before I clear off. Let me say again, a very, very warm welcome to you all. Now, in terms of what we're going to be looking at in today's session, I want to spend a little bit of time just going back through with you what has happened with SBR so far on the examiner's report and give you a feeling for how you can use the examiner's report to aid your studies as we get closer and closer to exam day. Then, depending on the time that we've got left at the end, we'll have a Q&A session. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing. So first things first, the story so far. The story so far. Now, just let me show you this. You may most likely already know that we've had 8 exams so far. Obviously, the more recent one, the most recent one, our July exam. Even with the COVID going on, we've had a small exam in July. Now, that means that at the moment there are 7 examiners' reports out there for you. We've got July pending, of course. There's a lot of information already out there for you to look into. Each of those exams contains 4 questions, which means there are basically 32 main questions that have been set so far. But don't forget, within each main question, there are sub-questions. A question might be made up of different parts, for sure. Now, that's a lot of questions. My question to you, I wanted to hopefully get an answer from you, was basically, what do you think? Here we go. Right, I'm going to say entire audience. Here we go, folks. How many scripts do you think have been marked so far? Any idea of the number of scripts that have been marked so far in those 8 exams? I wonder whether you've got an idea about that. Well, at a conservative guess, you may be thinking something like 50 to 60,000 scripts have been marked so far. My point being, everybody, that means there is a lot of evidence so far that the examiner and the examining team are able and have commented on for our benefit. And it's important to remember that the examining team is not just the examiner, but it includes the entire marking team, which of course are marking your scripts and feeding back to the examiner the good things and maybe the not so good things. So please, really from this first point, start to think about how significant the examiner's report is for you because of all the evidence that we have on the exams in there. Now, what about the pass rate? Oh dear, look at that, September 2018, 47%. Sadly, less than half of students who sat the exam got through the exam. We want that better. Let's look at the next exam. Oh dear, December 18, still 47%. Oh dear, let's go on to March. A bit better, but still less than half of students getting through the exam. We go on to June 2019, 48%. And it's not until September of last year that we can go, yes, oh wow, ish, 52%. Now more than half of the students getting through the exam. We go on to the next exam, December, oh dear, 2019, 48%. We're going down again. And you can start to see the average here through these exams. Wow, a little bit better, 51%. So what do you reckon is going to be the pass rate for the July exam that has just been sat? And of course, at the moment, we don't know. Is it going to be an oh dear, or is it going to be an oh wow? Now, my concern is that at the moment, when those results are coming through, there are too many students going, oh dear. And what we want is far more of the students to be, wow, yes, fantastic, fantastic, and we can do that. So as a result of that, what I've done is I've renamed this little session, how can we achieve more of the oh wow and less of the oh dear using the examiner's report? Okay, and that's really, really significant. I want us to have the oh wow. Now, the examiner's report spends quite a lot of the report on what are called general comments. And this is the point where I'm just going to switch off the camera for now, because I want you to concentrate on what we have in front of us. So I'm going to disappear. I am going to disappear if my cursor allows me. I'm going to go away for a bit. Okay, so I want you to have a look at these general comments. Now, over the next pages, the next few pages, let me show you this, everybody. Let me show you this. I've taken a few screenshots here, and I want you to get an idea of how the examiner's report is actually structured. So we have basically 4 sections: the format of the exam, a general approach to the examination, comments on individual questions, specifics, that's what I'm going to look at with you later, and then a conclusion. And I want you to see that in effect here, what you have got is a nice layout. It's the telling of a story. It's good structure. Now, if we go on to the previous exam report, which will be December 19, look at how it is structured. We have a format of the exam. We have exam performance. We have comments on individual questions, and we have a conclusion. You see a similarity here, hopefully. And if I then go back one more, I think you already know how this report is structured. We have format of the exam. We have a general approach to the exam. We have specific comments on individual questions, and we have a conclusion. It's a nice way of telling a story. And that is really, really important for 2 reasons. First of all, using the examiner's report as learning materials, you know there is going to be consistency when you pick up one report and then you pick up another. And the second thing is, telling the story is basically what we are doing in the exam. And that way you've effectively got a start, a middle and an end. Hey, that's quite a nice way of actually getting across your points to the examining team. So I want you to just take that on board just by looking at those individual screenshots. You don't need to look at the detail of those reports. We're going to have a look at some of that in the next few minutes. Now, what I've done is I've gone right back to the beginning to September 2018. I've looked at some of the points that I think are relevant to you then, and I've looked at the March 2020 examiner's report and picked up some comments that I think are really, really important in that examiner's report. And this is all really, really, really good evidence for you to take on board for your studies. So let's start back to the beginning, September 2018. What did the examiner say? This was the first sitting of the new SBR exam, the Strategic Business Reporting exam, which tests professional competencies within the corporate reporting environment. Within the corporate reporting environment, whether you call it financial reporting, corporate reporting, or SBR, we're talking about reporting and what you've got to be aware of. What does it mean, professional competencies? What are these professional competencies? What are these skills that you really, really have to demonstrate to the examining team? Well, if I take us on to the next slide, which takes us on to March this year, we can see what those competencies are. We can see the SBR exam requires candidates to demonstrate their ability to appraise, to assess, to critically discuss and apply accounting concepts and principles to scenarios and explain the appropriateness of a particular accounting treatment. Those are the competencies: critically discussing, applying concepts and principles, appraising, assessing, commenting, discussing. I hope you can see that as a result of what is on this screen, the next becomes very, very, very apparent. Although the SBR syllabus is not significantly different from the old P2 syllabus, it's not at all. The syllabus is basically the same. It's how it's examined, and in this SBR exam, it gives more marks to written answers rather than numerical ones. Now, just let's go back here. appraise, assess, critically discuss and apply. I don't see numbers. I hear words. I hear narrative. And that is what the examiner time and time again is having to say. This is a narrative exam. So we had September, we had March, and then look at this. This again is March 2020. This can involve some calculation as well as explanation of the relevant accounting standards. You notice some calculation. Again, let me take you back here. Written answers rather than numerical ones. There will be some calculation, but it's primarily about the discussion. It's primarily about the narrative. And I hope I'm really getting that point across, because there's more of this. Look at this, please. The SBR paper also includes ethical aspects requiring candidates to demonstrate their understanding of the professional and moral judgments that accountants must make in practice. A professional and moral judgment. That's not a numbers game. That's a thought process. That's having to decide how to act. In the exam, that's a discussion. That isn't a calculation. We go on. Just look at this, everybody. What does it mean? We've seen on one of the slides, it says talk about some calculation. And I really, really do want to get this point across. When the examiner talks about some calculation, it is important that we realize that roughly 25 marks, I say roughly, on average, 25 marks are going to be for the calculation, for the numbers. 25 marks. Could be 20, could be up to 30, but I'm saying roughly approximately 25 marks for the numbers. Let me put it another way. That, of course, means that 75%, roughly, on average, 75% of the marks are going to be for the words, the narrative, the writing. They're all basically the same thing, aren't they? Words, narrative, writing. Really, really important. Let's take that one step further, because what is that narrative all about? Well, it's about the discuss. It's about the explain. It's about the advise, the advising. Those are basically the verbs that we see within the SBR exam based on the examiner's reports that are the narrative. It's how we narrate, discuss, explain, and advise. Now, I seem to think that quite a few students like a nice mnemonic. So I've given you a mnemonic to think about this very, very, very important point. Discuss, explain, advise is basically your narration, your wording, your narrative in the exam. Discuss, explain, advise is the form of the narrative. And it's really, really important, please, that we remember it's not just words, it's how we use those words. It's what those words are going to be. Let's take this further, please. In front of you, you have part of question 1 from the very first SBR exam, September 2018. Draft an explanatory note to the directors of Banana discussing the following. Okay. Here's the second part of the same question. Discuss whether the directors are correct to treat Melon as a financial asset. Discuss. Let's carry on. Discuss how the derecognition requirements of IFRS 9 should be applied. Let's carry on. This is now question 4 of the same exam paper, September 2018. Explain the criteria in both 2010, 2015 conceptual frameworks. I'm not giving you the full question. I'm just wanting you to see here. Let's think of this. Oh, discuss the implications for Sky's financial statements for both the years ended 31st of August, X7, X8. I hope you're getting the point here. Another part of the question, still question 4, but another part of it, advise the directors on whether the above additional performance measures would achieve fair presentation. Advise. narrate words. And it is only when we get to the very last part of the last question that we see the word prepare. We see the word prepare, which of course means calculations. So I really hope, let me just move this around a little bit. I really hope that you get that idea very clearly in your mind. Now, you are seeing a word appear on your screen, and if anybody wants to tell me what that means, I'll be really delighted to find out. This word pirate. Well, some of you may be looking at this and thinking, yeah, I've seen this before, and I think I might have seen it in the textbook. Pirate, isn't that something that we write down when we're talking about the recognition criteria for development expenditure in accordance with IAS 38? Well, yes, it is, but I would not want to write that down in an exam paper, because that's not how you would write things or talk about things to a client when you were advising them. Nobody is going to stand in front of a client and say, oh yeah, the criteria for IAS 38, oh, it's that word pirate, isn't it? Because the client is going to say, what? So we have to be aware of not just the fact that it's words, but how we use the words. What does that mean? Now, let's go on to this. Back to the examiner's report, September 2018, regurgitation. You score very little in the exam for simply regurgitating the requirements of standards. And by the way, no standard, IAS 38 does not say the word pirate. It talks about the criteria that allow you or require you to capitalize. You should start building the skills necessary. Here's those competencies again. Analyze, apply standards, consider the effects of required treatments on stakeholders, and discuss wraparound issues such as rationale. Rationale is not a yes-no answer. It requires internal thinking. It requires debate. It requires critique. All these different words, again, hopefully getting you to think about the quality of the narrative that you have to present to the marking team. Here's another thing, please, for you. It's important to consider the format of your answer. It's not just the fact that it's words. It's not just the fact that what words you use are important. It's also really important to consider how those words are going to be structured. Look at what we've got on here. A good answer is well signposted. In other words, the marker is led through the answer so that they can clearly identify different issues or sub-requirements. Let me show you an example of this, please. Oh, look at this, good exam technique is to use the headings. That's interesting, because look at what's coming up next. I don't know what you can see here, but it looks to me quite messy. We have a phrase, we have a saying, you may well be familiar with it, which is, I can't see the wood for the trees. It means it's confused. It means that I can't really find out what's important. But look at what I'm now going to do. I'm going to signpost this. I'm going to talk about the wood separately. I'm going to highlight it as the discussion about wood. I think you now know what the next part of this discussion is going to be about. It's going to be about the trees. I've signposted my answer to make it clearer for the markers to pick out the relevant points without them having to search around. And then, guess what? If there are calculations to do with this scenario, then I've highlighted those. But of course, the calculations are there to support the narrative. They do not take precedence over the narrative, because 25 marks up to, roughly, is for the numbers, but 75% roughly are for the words. Really important, please, to remember that. And then there's something else. There is something else. But, oh my goodness me, look at this. We're back here. We're back here. Markers say time and time again that they are sometimes faced by page after page of narrative. Not required, everybody. Not required. Not required. Chapter and verse, not required. Make your narrative clear, concise. Explain the rationales, explain what you think, explain through your discussion what you see in front of you. It doesn't have to be chapter and verse. It needs to be concise, it needs to be clear. And I hope that it's a really, really important point to get across. Now, let's go back to a few other points. Candidates cannot rely on a single textbook or revision course. And I think this is a very, very interesting point, everybody, for the following reasons. No rote learning, please. You cannot pass this exam just by thinking that, oh, I saw this in a textbook, so I'm going to write that down. You've got to take it above and beyond that. You've got to develop this deeper understanding. Deeper understanding. How do you apply a certain accounting standard? What are the challenges with this application? That is a thought process that you will most likely deal with away from just a textbook. You've got to go above and beyond that, really have. Here's another point, and I want you to do this, please, as soon as we have finished. A well-prepared candidate that knows how to discuss and explain and advise, a candidate that has those competencies, their ability to critique and analyze, the rationale that they can show. How did I arrive at this? Why did I think? They've gone above and beyond, and they've looked at websites like the Standards Board's website, because it's developing a wider understanding, a wider knowledge. Now, one thing I want you to do, please, straight away after this session, I'm not going to do it now, but if you click, if you look on that, if you look at IFRS.org, you will see our beloved Standards Board, and you will get an idea of how they go about developing the standards, the challenges that they have, how long it takes, who they're trying to communicate to, etc., etc. These are the things that give you added confidence in terms of getting a brilliant, oh wow, result for your exam. A couple of other things before we move on to some specific points. Let me just put this all up together. And it's really the last point here that I want to highlight. It's not a memory test, this exam. Yes, of course, you need to remember the knowledge that you've learned, but the application of that knowledge is specific to each question, each scenario that you have. Don't try and think about, oh, I saw this in a question before, so that's what's going to happen this time. It's not how it works. It really isn't how it works. You sit there with confidence and you say, this is what I see in this question, in this specific question, this specific part of the question, and this is what I'm going to demonstrate to the marking team. Practicing questions and preparing answer plans is useful, but it's only useful if you review your work against a model answer. There's one thing I want to say here, please, and it is this. I want you, everybody wants you, your tutors want you, if you're learning at a college, they want you, we want you all to practice questions as soon as possible. And how do you reference that? Well, of course, you typically will go back to a model answer, but I want you to remember this, please. In the exam, you are not trying to replicate, regurgitate a model answer. The model answers are just past answers. They're too detailed for you. You're not expected to replicate that in the exam. The marking team want to see you coming through in that exam paper. They want to see your thoughts. They want to see your discussion, your rationale. How did I decide that something was correct or maybe not correct? How did I come up with, I think we should have chosen X rather than Y. We should choose this accounting standard rather than another one. That's your creativity coming through your dialogue, your narrative. Okay? And it says here about get feedback from the tutor. Then it just says here, this is what the examiner said, remember, so you can learn what you could do better next time. Well, I'm going to get rid of that final bit because that seems to me a little bit negative. We don't want a next time because what we want is a wow. We want a wow with this time, this exam, because we know what the examining team is looking for, and we know what are the competencies that we've got to demonstrate to the exam team. So those are the general things. You think about your narrative, you think about the significance of the narrative, you think about the balance of marks towards the discuss, the explain, advise. You think about the quality of that narrative, you think about not quantity but quality, and you think about opening your mind up to the fact that there isn't necessarily one right answer, because it's based upon a rationale, it's based upon you explaining what you see. And we'll have a look at something in the next slides on this. Now, let's now effectively take that further forward. And I want to show you a couple of specific issues for the rest of the session. And I'm taking you back to question 2 of December 2018. And I'm going to put up here some extracts from this question. It's to do with this property in Hallam. It could be anywhere, but this property is in Hallam. And it says, included within the non-current assets of Fiskerton is a property in Hallam which has been leased to Eddingley under a 40-year lease. The property was acquired for 20 million and was immediately leased to Eddingley. All of these words are important. The asset was expected to have a useful life of 40 years at the date of acquisition and have a minimal residual value. Okay. Oh, Fiskerton has classified the building as an investment property and has adopted the fair value model. Now, I can almost see it sitting there in the exam, the students sitting there in the exam thinking, oh, I've got this nailed. It's about fair values. Yeah, I see the word fair value. I can see the results now. Oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow. I am going to be a prize winner examiner. And let's go on to the second bit of the question. The property was initially revalued. It's there again to 22 million. Interim financial statements have indicated that gearing was 51% prior to the revaluation. Yes, this is about revaluations, valuations, fair values. The managing director was made aware of this breach, etc., etc. The property is now carried at a value of 28 million, which is determined by the sale of a similar sized property. Okay. The property was located in a much more prosperous area and built with a higher grade of material. We're back at valuations. An independent professional valuer has estimated the value to be no more than 22 million. Brilliant, brilliant. I can still, and here it is, final bit. The managing director has argued that fair value should be referenced to an active market and is refusing to adjust the financial statements, even though he knows it is contrary to international accounting standards. Brilliant. I look at the requirements, and the requirement says this: discuss how the Hallam property should have been accounted for and explain the implications for the financial statements. I've read all that through. I focused in on this bit about fair values, and it says here, discuss how it should have been accounted for. Fair values, I'm seeing in my head, I'm saying, oh, that wonderful thing. I'm going to tell the examiner everything I know about fair values, those levels, those really, really important levels. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a bit of a problem, and it's the IFRS 13 problem. It seems that every time there is a question that mentions fair values, that we have this. Many candidates discuss fair valuation under IFRS 13 at length and quoted the various levels of fair valuation. Level 1, level 2, level 3. I did, that's what I did. That's what I did, examiner. Oh dear. Oh dear. In these circumstances, few marks were given for quoting IFRS 13 as it was not the point. But it talked about fair values. How can it's not the point of the question? Examiner. Again, it is important that candidates answered the question and discuss how the property should have been accounted for and the implications of the incorrect treatment as regards the financial statements and debt covenant. All of a sudden, I've come out of the exam thinking, oh, I just got that completely fantastic. I'm a prize winner, and oh dear. Put it another way, everybody. Answer the specific question in front of you at that specific time. Read every word very, very carefully. Make specific points relevant to that specific question. Regurgitation of just something that's in my head, fair values. I'm going to get everything down about fair values. And of course, the levels, never specific. It's not enough. Specifically, one question might have two questions. You saw that, and even more specifically, and this is really the point, please, that I want to get across to you. Never, ever, ever assume, don't assume because it says investment property that it's actually investment property. Don't assume that just because you see the word fair value that actually it should be at fair value. This is SBR, this is critiquing, this is analyzing, this is questioning, this is being skeptical, this is not taking things for granted or at face value. The property should not have been classified as investment property, which has impacts going forward. Many candidates felt that the investment property was justified. So not only was all the stuff about the levels largely irrelevant, it wasn't an investment property, but students went down the road of saying this is an investment property, the fair value model, blah, 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 blah. Look at this, where a candidate concluded with some justification that the property was an investment property, some marks, but not enough marks. Some marks were awarded. I believe this is an investment property, and I'm going to explain to you why I think it is an investment property. That will get me some marks, but I want the full marks. But here, I am going to get some marks because I've explained why. What is my rationale for believing this is an investment property? The markers will look at this and say, well, actually, yes, I can understand to a degree what you have done here, and I will give you some marks. But what we wanted is, wow, actually, this is not an investment property. And actually, fair value is not relevant here. This is what I want you to think. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, we have a picture of a goose. It's a picture of a wild goose. We have a phrase. We have the phrase which is going on a wild goose chase. It means basically we are wasting our time. I don't want you to waste your time in the exam. You can't afford to waste your time in the exam. You have to remember these points here. Never assume, because if you assume, there's a fair chance that you may well go on a wild goose chase and you're going to be facing the oh dear when we want oh wow. Now, this question we're going to be looking at in more detail when we come back in August. So the point is really just to flag up a couple of things here to you. And I want to do the same with this standard here, IFRS 15. We're going to look at another part of the same question, IFRS 15. Anything come to mind? Anything come into the mind with IFRS 15? Well, typically, this is what comes into students' minds straight away. Steps, not just any old steps, but the 5 steps of IFRS 15. I wonder. Let's look at the question. This is still question 2 from that same exam paper. Again, there's a sales contract. Fiskerton has entered into a sales contract for the construction of an asset with a customer, whereby the customer pays an initial deposit. The deposit is refundable only if Fiskerton fails to complete the construction of the asset. Okay? The remainder is payable on delivery of the asset. If the customer defaults, Fiskerton has the right to retain the deposit. Okay? The managing director believes that as completion of the asset is performed over time, revenue should be recognised accordingly. Yes, I know that, but I've got to tell the examiner about the steps to begin with. I've got to go through that. The examiner obviously needs me to tell the examining team that I understand that the way that revenue is recognised is all based upon the model, this 5-step model. He's persuaded the accountant to include the deposit and a percentage of the remaining balance. Yeah. Let's look at the requirements. In accordance with the International Accounting Standard, IFRS 15, discuss whether revenue recognised from the contract should be recognised on a stage of completion basis. Yeah, I'm going to get to that, examiner, but I'm going to tell you all about the steps because that is so, so important for your understanding and my understanding. Oh, it's worth 4 marks. Oh, never mind. Never mind. You're going to get the steps anyway. The second is the observations to do with this specific question. The second part of the question required a discussion as to whether revenue arising from a sales contract should be recognised on a stage of completion basis under IFRS 15. Here's the old dear bit. Here's the old dear bit. Any mention of IFRS 15 in a question seems to prompt a regurgitation of the 5 steps, even when it is completely irrelevant to the question. This type of answer gains very few marks. Look at it. As this level of exam requires candidates to demonstrate knowledge of the specific requirements in the standard. Isn't it the same thing as what we've had before? Let me put it another way. Specific, 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 specific. Never assume. Oh, let me put it another way. Don't allow yourself, please, to go off on a wild goose chase. Question. Be skeptical. What really do I think is going on? Just because I see the word completion basis doesn't mean to say it's going to be on a completion basis. Just because I see the words property, plant and equipment doesn't mean to say it actually is property, plant and equipment. Just because I see the word intangible doesn't necessarily mean it's intangible. These are words you have to question because this is what happens in the real world. This is the complexities that we're dealing with. One more thing, and I hope, again, by the way, everybody, let me just say this, that this question again, we're going to look at in our second session, and I want to expand on this a bit more. But in the time that we've got here, I just wanting you to see that the way that you instill confidence in yourself is to slow things down when you're preparing your answer, when you're reading the question, when you're practicing questions before you get in the exam, and you say to yourself all of the time, I'm not going to assume. I'm not going to splurge out a load of regurgitated rote learning stuff. I'm going to demonstrate that I have the competencies of a professional corporate reporter. Yes. There's the goose. Ethics. Let's look at this, please. Again, this is still the same question. I just want to show this to you, please. And this is still question 2 for 7 marks. Explain any ethical issues which may arise for the managing director and the accountant from each of the scenarios. 7 marks, no calculations here. 7 marks to discussion about ethical issues, but it's not just 7 marks, because in question 2, and indeed most likely question 4, but certainly in question 2, you will be able to get yourself a further 2 marks for professional marks, and that is based upon the quality of your discussion. How did you rationalize things? How did you debate things? How did you look at the difficulties and the things that are a little less difficult? How did you look at the challenges, as opposed to just coming out with rote learned information? Now, let's look at this. This is again the examiner's observations to do with this question. The final part of the question considered the ethical consequences of the actions of the managing director and the pressures placed upon the accountant. I'm sorry, I'm getting excited here. Upon the accountant to agree to the incorrect accounting practices. This question was generally well answered. Yeah, but I know there's going to be an oh dear. Oh, the main issue was that some candidates simply quoted ethical guidance without applying it to the scenario. I don't see that as a professional answer. I don't see just quoting something without explaining it and seeing how it should be applied or could be applied. It's not going to get you anywhere. We need to develop things. So let's think about this. As it says here, professional marks were awarded for the quality of the ethical discussion. Again, discussion, words, quality of those words, not just words, but the type of word. How are you using those words? I bet you could all recount to me, everybody, the ethical framework, the ACCA's IFAC ethical framework. We have integrity. What's the next one? We have objectivity. What's the next one? We have professional competence and due care. Brilliant, fantastic. I think there's two more. We have confidentiality and we have professional behaviour. Fantastic stuff. But there's a problem with this. The problem is so many candidates will just throw this out in a question where there is an ethical element and regurgitate it, this rote learned framework, without thinking about this, everybody. What does it all mean? What does it mean? These are words, but what do they mean? Demonstrate you understand what they mean. Why is this framework so important for us as professional accountants? How is it? How can it? How should it be applied in practice? How difficult is it to apply in practice? Let's think about this. You're there at work, you're doing some figures, and your boss comes up to you and says, hey, Rob, just to let you know that you're up for a promotion, you are. You're doing very, very well. You were really up for a promotion. And think about that. What's that going to do to your salary? There's just one thing. There's just one thing. In order to get that promotion, just let those figures go through with you. No, you don't need to question them. Just let those figures go through. You're being coerced into doing something. What's your reaction to that? What must you do? What cannot you do? You can't ignore that. You can't ignore that. You've now got a dilemma, and it is a dilemma that is faced by accountants day in, day out, and we need to know how to deal with that. And please, one of the things that you mustn't just do is to say, oh yeah, resign, get yourself out of that environment, resign. What? How easy is it just to resign? What's going to happen when you resign? You need a salary. You've got to think about these, and it is the development of that that gets you a good answer in the exam and gives you those quality professional marks. Okay, and I've just put the one down, and you can see why, how, what. Really, really, really important, everybody. Let me just move this across. You won't be able to see this. So I just want, again, you to think about this. It's not just the words, it's the quality of those words. It's not just the discussion, it's the quality of your discussion. It's not just the narrative, it's how I've put the narrative together, the structure and the quality of the words that are in that. Now, let's just have a little review here. And I want you just to see this, please, because I think you're fully aware that we have two sections in the exam, 4 questions, 4 main questions. Please, you've got to be in it to win it. You answer every part of every question. That's what the examiner is, of course, going to tell you if the examiner was doing this. You know that roughly throughout this paper, on average, 25 of the marks are going to be for the calculation. On average, 75% is going to be for your dean, your discuss, your explain, your advise, your narrative. In section A, we've just seen it, there are going to be, of those discussion marks, 2 marks in the ethical question. It's going to be question 2 of the exam. 2 marks for the quality of how you reasoned the impact of this ethical dilemma on the relevant person. What do you think they should do? What do you think they can't do? What is the problem with their potential action? That's taking it above and beyond just coming out with words. There'll also be a further 2 marks in section B. Again, section B, the 2 marks in section B will be to do with what we call the interpretation question. And I'm going to elaborate on that in our session in August. But again, it's about the quality, and I know I keep saying it, the quality of your discussion, the amount by which you take it above and beyond just throwing down words, and these are words that I've seen in textbook, blah, 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 give me the marks. No, you have to work for the marks, but the effort is worth it because you're going to have the wow rather than the oh dear. We don't want the oh dear. So those are really the main things that I want to get across to you. And remember, please, that the examiner's report, in terms of the general comments and the specific comments, you've got a lot that you can have a look at already. Go back over those 7 reports, and I bet you the things that you will find to do with maybe the specific questions are things that are going to come up or have come up with our session here and will come up time and time again. You've got to think, everybody. You've really, really got to think. And please say to yourself, as you start practicing questions, get into that inquisitive mindset. Get into a mindset of questioning. Get into a mindset of reading every word and reading the word that is there in that specific question, and not the word that you think it is. And please ensure that you're not going to say, yeah, I see the words fair value, that's levels, that's levels, that's levels. I'll show you in the next session that there could be many, many questions to do with fair value that have got nothing to do with the levels. There are many, many questions on IFRS 15 that have got nothing to do with just verbalizing these steps. Now, this, I think, is where I'm just going to go back and share my camera. And it may be that Tahir wants to come in here, because we are at the time where I want to have some questions. Tahir, are you there?
Yep, Rob, very much still with you, enjoying your presentation. Just went back to my SBR or the old P2 days, listening to everything you were saying.
So can we get some questions in here, Tahir? Is there anything that's come across?
Yep, there's loads of questions. I can see some of them quite relevant.
Please.
A good one to start with is, how can we make sure we get the easy professional marks, in the SBR exams?
Yeah. Okay. Let me reiterate this. In fact, I think I've already said it, and I hope I have said it.
Yep.
Those professional marks, there are 4 professional marks. You have to say to yourself, as you are practicing, as you are preparing yourself, that where you go above and beyond. Let me just make this clear again. If someone says to me, Rob, I'm going to give you £50,000 bonus, or thank you, but in order to get that bonus, this is what you've got to do. And I'm thinking, what they've just asked me to do is dodgy. I don't do dodgy. You're questioning my integrity. Now, my professional marks are by then explaining to the examining team the dilemma that I have. What do I do? Obviously we all need some money to survive on, but you're questioning my integrity in terms of how I'm going to get that. So I've now got to explain, yes, using the framework, but explain what those words actually mean. Not all of them, because that's just regurgitating, but the ones that you believe are specific and how it relates to that particular question. And when we come back in August, one of the things I will do is give you a case study from my real life. When I first moved into industry, my integrity was questioned right from the start. What? Nobody's ever questioned my integrity. I've never had any reason to question my integrity, but someone said to me right from the beginning, what could you do for us that is a little bit not right? Now, that was 30 years ago, but still is there with me. And what I want you to think about is those marks are easy for you to get as long as you feel the dilemma when it's question 2. And then you think about the stakeholders when it is the question to do with interpretation. What is it that stakeholders want? How do they get it? What are the problems with financial reporting? It's the simplest way to say to you, please, is to go above and beyond just a rote learned answer and give your thoughts. Be in the question, your thoughts.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob. The follow-on questions just come in. So in terms of past exam papers that are
Yes.
available on ACCA's website, how far must a student sort of go in terms of practice, and how much do they change? Obviously, there are significant changes happening to the IFRS.
Yeah, this is a really good question. The good news for all of us is that really since SBR changed, to SBR from P2, the standards have not really changed. The standards have not really changed at all. People often think of the difficult standards, 15, 16, IFRS 9, and we can elaborate this on the second session. But my answer to you all in terms of looking back over previous exam questions is all of them, all of them. As much as you can, because this is a really relevant point. The examining team are consistent. So what I mean by that is the way in which the questions are written will have a consistent style that gives you confidence. Every question is going to be different, but there is a similarity in how they are written, and the examining team are looking for the same sort of challenges, if you like. So the way to increase your confidence, yes, is to go back to as many past exam questions as you can, remembering you're not trying to replicate answers. You're trying to give your rationale, your thoughts. And one of the things the examining team have said as well is that in terms of going back over past exam questions, you don't need to fully put together a solution. You can plan. Planning is a great exercise. Planning, even mental planning, is really good. Thinking through how you want to have a start, a middle, and an end, and then maybe reviewing it. I shall review this session. I shall plan the next session. I shall think about how we have the session. So simple answer, you do as many, you go back as much as possible, because you will get confidence from looking at the style as well as getting your mindset to question every word.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Rob. Just on planning again, another question coming up from students. I mean, if we're planning to sit exams in subsequent exam sittings, the SBR exam, I believe they mentioned, how do we start preparing for SBR? Where do you start from generally?
Well, I hope we've got some time left to hear for these. Really good questions.
Definitely.
Yeah. Now, I think for everybody, some of you may be learning with a tuition provider. Some of you may be learning at home, self-study. I think one of the important things, and you know, I say this to my students, is that one of the great things you must do is to find a way of putting things into your own words. So you could take a standard, for example. Let's take IFRS 9. You might have spent 3 or 4 sessions in your studies looking at some of the important issues in IFRS 9. One of the really good things is then to take those notes, if you like, and summarize them in your own voice, in your own words. One of the other things is, I honestly would say this time and time again, if you said to me, tell me one thing that I must do, yeah, you must do this. You must know the name and the number of each standard. And people say to me time and time again, no, you don't need that. Yes, you do. For the reason that if someone was standing in front of me now, a client, and they said, Rob, I've got this transaction, I'm not sure what to do with it. If I said to them, well, actually, there's an accounting standard that deals with this, it doesn't really create a lot of confidence. But as soon as I say, well, in accordance with IAS 16, straight away, it's telling the other person that I know what I'm talking about. And in my mind, it allows me to think about which part of IAS 16, which part of the standard. So one of the really good things is to find a way of summarizing your knowledge, if you like, your understanding that you've developed from being in class, and to put it into your own words, because the examining team want you to be you and not your tutor and not your friend and not someone you've looked at on screen. So that's one way of doing it. And the other thing, please, and I really must say this, the importance of any question practice. I have seen so many times people turn up with a textbook that has been read from the first page to the last, and it's like, oh yeah, I know exactly what's on page 455, but it doesn't mean anything. Sitting and reading the textbook, it goes here, and typically it goes out here. You've got to do something with it. And that's why I say, for me, it's a really, really important thing that whatever I've taken on board, I then summarize it. If I'm doing a session for directors anywhere, and I'm maybe doing something specific to them, I will prepare my presentation, and I will always, for me, be writing things down as like a jog, putting things in my own words, thinking about how I want to put things across. Your own words are really important.
Brilliant, thanks, Rob. A lot of questions actually coming in, but I'm really conscious of your time as well. I mean,
no, you don't worry about my turn. You worry about. Let me just get rid of this update. I don't know what this is doing, but I've got something on my screen here. Please don't worry about my time. I want to be as helpful as I can.
There was one around, you know, is it a good strategy to have, you know, SBR coupled with or combined with the advanced audit and assurance exam in the same exam sitting?
Well, do you know, that's a question I have been asked many times. There's two strands to this answer. The first answer, and I don't want you to think that I'm sort of avoiding the question here, but the first answer is that everybody, you really must think for your own on this to a degree, because everybody does have different challenges. But what I would say is this, please. What I would say, and I think this is maybe the point, in my humble opinion, you cannot have an audit challenge without an accounting challenge. So obviously auditors need to have an in-depth understanding of the standards. For example, let's think about IAS 19. How are you going to get that discount rate? The auditor's got to effectively check how you arrived at your discount rate for your defined benefit scheme. So they go hand in hand. They go hand in hand for sure. Whether you sit them at the same time, I have to say, is based upon your levels of confidence with both of these, you know, challenges in their own right. That's what I would say. But let me say again, in my opinion, and it's a debate, you cannot have an audit issue without an accounting issue. So getting your skill basis for IFRS, the standards, the conceptual framework, reporting in all its forms, get that bedded in.
Brilliant, thanks, Rob. And quite a funny one, but I'm sure you get a lot of these questions as well. Now, do you expect to see cash flow statements in September 20 exams? Okay. I think this is a common question. Yeah.
No. Okay. Let's get this nailed once and for all. To hear the question, I think, was, do you expect to see a cash flow statement?
Yep. For the next upcoming exam, September 2020.
No. Not September, not December, not March, not June, not September, not December, not. Now, let me clarify this. In the SBR exam, hopefully, I know it's a whistle-stop tour here, but hopefully you've taken on that this is a narrative exam. You are never in this exam going to be asked to prepare a full cash flow statement like you may have done under P2. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Group cash flow statement, it's not going to happen. That was P2. But what you may be asked for is excerpts, extracts of the cash flow statement, which have been preceded by a discussion. And we've already had this numerous times in the SBR. Here is, let me just give you this. We have a disposal of a subsidiary company. Some of the consideration, some of the proceeds, I should say, are deferred. There's a discussion about that, and then an impact on the cash flow statement. That could be a discussion with an extract of numbers. But remember, it's only ever going to be an extract. And remember, the narrative is always going to take precedence from the numbers. So is there going to be a question about cash flows? Hey, there might be. There might be, I don't know. Because the examiner does not want us to be able to question spot. He wants us to demonstrate our skills. So there may be a question about cash flows, but fact, it is not going to be a full cash flow, group cash flow, whatever. It's only going to be an extract, and it will not sit on its own. It will be preceded by discuss, explain, advise, because that is Dean. Oh, I'm getting excited now. Sorry.
Brilliant. No, that's all right. Thank you. Thanks, Rob, for the brilliant suggestions. I think a final one. There's been loads that we've been answering, some of them anyway. One final one, and I think quite relevant to still, whilst these are paper-based exams, around presentation. How important is presentation, particularly for the ones that are really challenged, or maybe the likes of myself, who are challenged with being able to write, exams now?
Yeah, no, this is very, very good. And obviously we are moving towards computer-based exams where the quality of the writing, the ability to read that is not going to be an issue. It was something I was going to cover off next time, but I want everybody, please, to believe me. If nothing else, please believe me on this. The quality, let's assume that it's it's a written exam, paper exam, and I know, as I just said, but let's assume, or let's take this as fact. No marker is ever going to mark you down for poor handwriting. Never. No marker is never going to mark you down for poor spelling or poor grammar or poor use of the English language. Never. Because that's not how ACCA marks. ACCA marks on your ability to demonstrate relevant principles, relevant thoughts, the dilemmas. How did you arrive at that? Why did I think of that? Spelling, quality of the written word, how I've written it, whether I've put a full stop in the wrong place, completely irrelevant. It is irrelevant. It's important to get a script that the markers can easily go through. Signpost, signpost, signpost. That's important because it makes it makes the marker's job very, very easy. But the fact that I've spelt the word wrong, irrelevant.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Rob. I mean, very valid points coming through, and some really good engaging questions. So that will be it for us on the Q&A side. So over to you, Rob, and again, I think this pretty much sits very well in terms of what's coming up on the next slides that you have. There's been a lot of questions coming in from students. When is the next session? When can we expect to see Rob again? And I think what you've got on the next slide will probably help answer a lot of those questions. Okay. So over to you again.
Yeah, no, let me just go back to that. I hope for everybody it has been useful to a degree. I know it's quite a lot to get through in this session. Let me just go back to the initial point, is that I want everybody to have the confidence that you really should have for this exam. And yes, in terms of Tahir's point, let me just move this here. You can see this word discuss, yeah? And I think you know what the next word is going to be, because it has to be explain. And the next word, of course, is going to be advise. And that is what you have to start getting into your mindset right from day one, between now and when we meet again. And I'm going to put up the slide for when we meet again. It's talking. Now, you possibly realize from what our session here, I can talk for hours, and that's not necessarily a good thing for either you or me, but I say to all of us that the job of a strategic business reporter is to communicate, and we communicate primarily through the narrative rather than just the numbers. Numbers on their own don't make sense. So please discuss, explain, advise. I say to you, see you next time. That's what the examiner said, see you next time. We don't want that, but I do want you to come back on August the 18th for our second session. And it is here. There's my email address, please, if you want to send anything to me. I do have a Facebook group that that we're going to keep going. So if you go onto Facebook, SBR PTP exclamation mark, I'll put some things up there as we go through our time together before August the 18th. And that's it. Thank you very much, everybody. I will hand back to here, but just to say, please, try and just take some of these points in. SBR is huge, but it's a hugely manageable challenge. And I really, really say to you all, you can do it. You really can do it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Rob. I will certainly come back to you for any sort of final closing thoughts that you might have for our students while I still try and make myself presenter here so I could just get everybody to see my slides. But certainly, you know, quite valuable thoughts and comments shared today on the session with everybody attending. And I'd just like to sort of, you know, take this opportunity to really sort of divert everybody's attention towards the study support resources. A lot of what Rob was mentioning on this session today, you know, was out of some of the resources, and a lot of that came out of his own experience of teaching, you know, this exam and the IFRS for years and years. So all of these resources are pretty much available on ACCA's website. You know where to find them. You go on to www.acccaglobal.com. Under the students tab, there is a section that says study support resources. You click that and you'll see what you'll be seeing, something like this on your screen. You click on the ACCA qualification, you click on the exam, in this case SBR, and you'll have the entire host of resources for you. Another important resource, I think, which might be quite relevant for, again, the likes of those that have possibly had an exemption, you know, on the old financial or the previous, you know, FR exam. It's the virtual learning center that we have, and this is again a fantastic resource which has got, you know, short quizzes, and you know, you'd be able to go in and check your knowledge on, you know, financial reporting and all of that, and you know, if you're up to the mark or if you're ready to sit the SBR exam. So, you know, please do feel free to go in and make the most of these resources on ACCA's website. Here, you know, you've got things like your examiner's reports, your articles, past exam papers, specimen exams. You know, good time for you to start going in and, you know, start sort of engaging with these resources. If you've got to reach out to us, you know, here's some of our contact details. You can write into us on educationme@acccaglobal.com for anything that we can locally support you with. Alternatively, we will also, you know, we're also reachable on accame.me, which is our local, you know, sort of landing page, or on one of our social media platforms, which is Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We're available on all of these as ACCA Middle East. Before I end the session formally, you know, I'd like to personally thank Rob on behalf of everybody attending and ACCA Middle East for, you know, his valuable contribution to the session today. Rob, any sort of final ending thoughts from your side?
I think my final ending points were, or are, for everybody out there, as you are progressing towards, let's say, the September exam, never leave it too late. You start thinking now. And I know, you know, we could think ahead, but I want you to think now. I want you to think now about how you use the resources, how you approach your studies, so that it's effective, because you've got to know what you're aiming for. It's not just the words, it's what those words actually mean. Investment property doesn't mean investment property unless it really should be an investment property, for example. That's what I say. Question, 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 now. Think now. It's easier then as we get into that exam. Thank you, everybody.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for the final few valuable comments. And 18 August, so remember the date, everybody. Remember, that's when we can catch up again and we get to speak and listen to Rob on, you know, ACCA's platforms. Until then, keep safe and good luck, everybody. Take care.
Thanks very much, everybody. See you again.
Thank you. Take care.